Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And the Oakland A's are not in the playoffs this year, but the playoff series are half over at this point. The wild cards in the division series are behind us. We've got the league championship series and the World Series ahead of us, and things have broken very well for the team that beat us in the league championship series this year. The Texas Rangers, who with 103 wins are the best team in baseball, will have home field advantage for as long as they remain alive in the playoffs. They'll be facing off against an 87-win Baltimore Orioles team that beat us by 3 games for the final wild card spot in the American League. And a couple of wild card teams are the teams that are still alive in the National League. The 87-win Rockies will be going up against the 83-win Padres, the last team that made it into the playoffs this year. So seems to have broken very well for the Texas Rangers thus far. Before we find out who moves on to the World Series here in 2035, though, we are going to do our annual check-in on some of the top prospects around baseball that are not part of our organization, as well as some of our former players, and see exactly how some former very important Oakland A's or Oakland A's prospects did here in this 2035 season. And we'll start off looking at some of the position players that we've thought about picking up in the draft and or international amateur free agency over the years. Byron Dervish, who is popular with our English fans, only had about half the season in the majors this year, hit .204 with 11 homers and 33 ribbies in 186 at-bats for the Twins organization. Suffered a torn calf muscle right at the end of the year, but looks like he will be ready for spring training next year. But at 27 years old, certainly hasn't turned into a big-time player. In contrast, Jesus de la Campa, international free agent signing from 2037, continues to be a very effective player for Kansas City, although he misses a fair amount of time this past season. Only 405 at-bats, but he hit .299, 27 doubles, 7 triples, stole 9 bases, and put up a 106 WRC plus, a 2.3 WAR. Probably a player that I would use a little more aggressively on the base paths than Kansas City seems to, and a guy with outstanding range, excellent defensive shortstop, defensive second baseman for Kansas City with that 75 range and that 75 turn double play rating. Bobby Vermillion is a guy who was picked in the draft just 3 years ago. The contact and the avoid strikeout ratings for him look frighteningly horrible. He spent part of this year back in rookie ball and part of it in A ball. In A ball, hit 200 with 140 strikeouts and 335 at-bats. Just don't think he's ever going to hit enough to be a useful major leaguer. Alvaro Cepeda, international free agent signing from about a year and a half ago, hit .336 with 24 doubles, 13 triples, and 11 homers in just 277 at-bats for the Cleveland Guardians organization. He's viewed as the number 39 prospect in baseball. Don't love the personality, but he certainly has been very effective in his first 2+ seasons in rookie ball. Butch Wall, center fielder who was a first-round pick a couple years ago in 2033. Another guy who hasn't made it out of rookie ball yet. Did get the batting average up almost 100 points this past year to 251 with more power than a year ago. He was certainly an above replacement level player at that level. Still question his contact and avoid strikeout ratings, but certainly feels like Butch Wall has a chance, whereas I don't think Bobby Vermillion really does with the way his ratings look. And we'll finish up with a couple more outfielders. Sawyer Wenda, a guy who went 34th overall with a supplemental pick in 2034. Was well liked by some members of our worldwide scouting department. We were hoping he might slip to us with our supplemental picks, which I believe were maybe 35. It was like 35 or 36, and then 38 or 39. So we're hoping we might have an opportunity at him. Unfortunately, it didn't develop. Barely hit 200 this past year, but he was only 19 years old in rookie ball. Looking at his potential rating, still looks like he could be a pretty good player for the Rays organization. And then Greg Cuff is a guy who was picked out of Ohio State, 4th overall in 2032. He has spent the last 3 years trapped in high A ball. Don't necessarily love the way the Diamondbacks are managing his career. He hasn't been incredibly productive, batted just .210 this year, but did finally at least start hitting for homers with 28 homers, 67 ribbies. The home run power was always the big attraction for him, but 2.5 seasons at this point in high A ball seems a bit excessive for a guy who's going to be 25 years old in about a month. Turn our attention now to a few pitching prospects. Connor Fister, certainly not a prospect anymore at this point. The 27-year-old left-hander is a guy that we looked at several years ago in the draft, split this year between AAA and the majors after he was claimed off of waivers from the Giants organization by the Marlins. 0-1 record with a 3.05 ERA in 38 1/3 innings. Looks like he was a pretty solid reliever. 21 walks, though, in that 38 1/3 innings. Seems like the control is likely to always be a concern for Fathead Fister. Jesus Escobar, IAFA signing from 2031, made it up to A-ball this year where he was 12-5, 3.17 ERA, almost 10 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 4.3 WAR. Stuff certainly looks like it's a potential question with him, but could be a useful long reliever out of the bullpen for somebody down the line. And last but not least, Edison Faulau, first-round pick out of Canada in 2034, just a year ago. 3-5 with a 3.80 ERA for the Yankees organization in rookie ball. He's going to be 20 years old shortly. The lefty still looks like he could be a interesting major league pitcher if he reaches his full potential. Don't think he's ever going to be an ace, but certainly could be a solid starter. And as we are thinking about our team for this offseason and what we'll hopefully focus on doing in a couple of months or a couple of weeks when the offseason begins. Some guys who are solid, competent starters like we think Edison Faulau would certainly be interesting targets for us to pursue in the trade or free agent markets. And home field has proven to be a pretty good advantage just far in the league championship series, with both the Rangers and the Rockies winning the first 2 games of their series at home against the Orioles and Padres, respectively. So we'll turn our attention now to some more established players, some of whom we looked at when they were prospects and some of whom have been very important players in our organization over the years, or prospects that we ultimately traded away. Galterio Mancino, we've talked about him a lot. He was a pure hitter that we thought about seriously in the IAFA period in 2025, that first IAFA period. And he's had another monster season for Kansas City, hitting .326, 38 homers, 113 ribbies. Led the league in OPS and WRC plus while putting up a 6.8 WAR. Would expect the left fielder to merit some strong consideration for his second career MVP award. He's fragile physically and he's only 27 years old, but when he is healthy and in the lineup, he is very effective. And this was just the second time in parts of 5 major league seasons where he's basically been out there every day. And he's put up 7.7 and 6.8 WARs in the 2 full seasons he's had in the major leagues. So certainly a guy who has reached his full potential. Shoji Bame is a infielder that we made an offer to when he was an international free agent 3 seasons ago at this point. Could not ultimately compete with the Dodgers as far as money. Looks like at the age of 32, he may be starting to deteriorate a little bit. Batting average dropped to 249 this year. Still was a pretty productive offensive player, though. 27 homers, 59 ribbies in 438 at-bats. Put up a 123 WRC plus, but a 2.5 WAR for $27.2 million is a luxury that I just don't think we can afford in Oakland. For the Dodgers, it's not a huge issue, but I think it's probably a good miss by us. Colt Keith, the third baseman who was brilliant in 6.5 years with us before we traded him away for potential salary reasons. He's due to make $25 million next year, and then as a player option for $26 million the year after that. Fragile in terms of his injury proneness. We traded him away not all that long ago, just about 2.5 months ago, when he was out with plantar fasciitis for about 6 weeks. He had earlier had a strained ab this year that cost him over a month. We were concerned, given his age and his historic fragility, that he might come back as wrecked. Fortunately for the Giants, he did not. And he was actually pretty impressive for the Giants in the month of September when he was finally healthy. Hit 339, 8 homers and 20 ribbies in 109 at-bats. A brilliant 179 WRC plus, and the win and a half above replacement that he put up for them was bigger than the 1.3 WAR that he put up for us over the first 3+ months of the season. Although, as we talked about, he did miss a good chunk of time with that injury. I'd be surprised if he continues to perform at that pace going forward. I don't love that we moved on from him after a really nice run in Oakland, where he was a member of our World Series championship team in 2029, his first year with us. And over the 6.5 years with us, he averaged over 30 home runs and exactly 100 ribbies a year for us. So was an incredibly productive player for us, but I think eventually the costs got to be a little too much and had to move on from Colt Keith. Byron Brain was a very highly regarded player by just about every team in baseball when we were shopping him earlier this season. Pretty respectable defensive catcher who could have a exceptional power bat and a great ability to draw walks for a catcher. We were concerned about the contact in the avoid strikeout ratings. We ultimately decided that the offers we were getting for Mr. Brain were too good for us to refuse, despite the fact that he could be a pretty productive offensive player. He hit 206 in 63 at-bats for the Marlins after the trade, did have 4 homers and 10 ribbies. So he was basically a league average offensive player, just a bit above replacement level. We're still pretty happy with the first baseman, Brailovsky, and the starting pitcher, Patterson, that we got back in return, and we clearly needed to add more than Brain into the deal to get those guys. But we'll certainly continue to track what he does over the course of his career. Brian Rincon, our longtime shortstop, moved on to the Angels a few years ago. Seems to be struggling with the bat. Hit just 204 this year with a 72 WRC plus. Still a very good defensive player, but his 1.4 WAR is probably almost entirely driven by his glove at this point. Bertrand Albrighton was an early IAFA signing for us, a guy that we traded away a couple years ago. Hit 230 with 9 homers and 41 ribbies, is a part-time player for Seattle, 85 WRC plus. Always loved his personality, but the bat never, unfortunately, really developed into anything all that special for the Dominator. Arturo Estrada, a guy who we traded away a few years ago. Look back at the history of him. He was a big IAFA signing for us in 2028. And he was the cornerstone of our rental of Juan Soto when we were making a push for the playoffs, which ended up being successful, but it was also a push for the World Series that did not end up being successful in 2032. Strada spent the entire year in AAA this year, was basically a league average offensive player, 24 years old now, still potentially interesting in terms of extra base hits and base running. He stole 29 bases, hit 27 doubles and 4 triples. With the poor power and the below average eye and the fragility, though, just don't think he's ever going to be a superstar at the major league level. Sergio Figueroa made it up to AAA this year, split the year between high A and AAA, combining for 22 homers and 57 ribbies at the two levels. Put up a 157 WRC plus in AAA. The left-handed hitting outfielder looks like he could be a useful bat. Going to draw a ton of walks. Decent contact, decent home run power. Not a superstar in my mind, but certainly looks like he could be a useful player. He was traded away for a rental of Brian Ramos. Prince Moultrie, left fielder that we traded out of our organization, split the year between AA and AAA, combined for just 5 homers and 45 ribbies. Did hit close to 300, but another guy whose lack of power and below average eye is probably going to compromise a bit how productive he is at the major league level. He's also 26 years old at this point, and he's never played in the majors, so don't view him as a big-time player. And last, but certainly not least, Kevin Stubblefield. Traded him away right before the trade deadline this year to the Boston Red Sox as one of the key pieces of that rental of Luis Lujan. Lujan played very well for us, but didn't end up helping us into the playoffs, unfortunately. Stubblefield was not used all that much by Boston. He did hit 286, but only had 35 at-bats for them. Was a pure bench player, playing in just 14 games and only 7 starts over the final 2.5 months or so of the season. Still was a below-average offensive player, given his lack of defensive prowess anywhere except first base, and a bat that at this point in the major leagues has been below average. I don't think we're going to miss him all that much. Turning to some pitchers that we've spent time talking about in the past, the knuckleballer Andres Rojas, who we rolled the dice on and we're hoping to get with the 53rd pick in 2027. He ended up going 6 picks before we had the opportunity to bring him on board. Clearly, with the way he developed, he would have been a more than acceptable first-round draft pick. Former Cy Young Award winner, who's now a 4-time All-Star. 12-10 this year with a 3.07 ERA, while leading the National League with 220 innings pitched and putting up a 5.1 WAR for the Marlins organization. Chris Patterson, pitcher who was picked first overall in the 2031 draft out of Washington, 12-5 with a 4.02 ERA for the Tampa organization. Cowboy Patterson, certainly a very good, solid major league pitcher, heading into his arbitration years where he's going to start making some decent money, most likely. Juan Aguayo, an international free agent a few seasons ago. Looks like he was waived by the Dodgers before this season, ended up in the Brewers organization. That low stuff with excellent movement and well above average control profile is one that was intriguing to some viewers. I honestly haven't typically played with this kind of profile, which is part of the reason why we're tracking him, even though he didn't end up with us this year. He did pretty well with a 172 ERA and a small sample size with the Dodgers at the end of last season. Unfortunately for him, struggled a lot in Milwaukee this year, an ERA of over 5 in 87 and a third innings pitched. 124 whip, not horrible, but barely above replacement level, and his Sierra was pretty similar to his actual ERA. Joe Lewin is a pitcher that we traded away a few years ago. Finally made it to the majors this year with the Phillies organization. Took over as their closer. Put up a 4.76 ERA, which was not particularly impressive, but did strike out just over a batter per inning while saving 29 games for the Phillies. Still looks like he could be a pretty good, solid major league pitcher. I believe we may have traded him away the first time we rented Brian Ramos. Yeah, he was part of the first rental of Brian Ramos for us. Lewin, a guy who we drafted very high. Looks like he could be a pretty solid pitcher. Not going to be a superstar, but a very good, useful major league pitcher. So that one's probably gone against us a little bit. Jonathan Niswanger, the Purdue University Boilermaker, split the year between rookie ball, double A, and triple A. Very strange usage for a guy who was 23 years old, who had been drafted out of college a year earlier, for him to pitch 36 games in rookie ball. But we don't have Swampy in our organization, so unfortunately we're unable to make those decisions. Did actually pitch really well across all three levels, a 2.43 ERA in rookie ball, no earned runs allowed in 6 innings in double A, and a 1.64 ERA over 11 innings in triple A for the Cleveland organization. Still a guy that looks like he could be a useful major league pitcher. Don't think his control is ever going to be excellent, which may lower our willingness to try to bring him on with trade, since we've got a few guys on this organization or in our organization already who struggle with their control a bit. And last but not least, the final original A from when we started this playthrough in the 2024 season. He made it with us all the way up through last year, but we finally let Mason Miller leave as a free agent this past off season. He had to go to Korea to find a job with the Lot Giants. He was 12-11 with a 3.98 ERA over in the Korean Baseball League. But looking at his profile here, you can see he looks pretty much like a replacement level player at the major league level in America. And he's continued to lose a lot off of his velocity, even since we moved on from him. Last offseason, he was still throwing in the mid-90s, so he's lost another couple miles off his velocity, and his stuff since the middle of last year has definitely moved in the wrong direction. So although would have been loyal of us to keep Mason Miller around, I think ultimately wish him the best of luck in the Korean Baseball League, and it'll be interesting to see if he's able to find a job back in the United States this upcoming offseason. And some interesting results in the games hosted by the lower seeds in the League Championship Series. The Padres dropped the first 2 and only 2 games in San Diego as the Rockies swept them 4-0. But the Orioles, who had that last playoff spot that we were hoping to sneak into, won 3 in a row in Baltimore, and they have a 3-2 lead ahead of the Rangers as they head back to Texas. The home team still hasn't lost in this series, but I think you kind of still have to like where you're sitting if you're the Orioles at this point. But the Texas Rangers said, hey, We are the best team in baseball. The home team won every game in the ALCS, and your 103-win Texas Rangers are going to be facing off against the 87-win wildcard Colorado Rockies in the 2035 World Series. But before we find out who's going to win the World Series and what type of initial decisions we might have to make this offseason, we're going to take a look at our minor league system, and we made some pretty good progress this year. We improved from kind of a middle-of-the-pack organization to be ranked 6th out of 30 overall. We've got 6 top 100 prospects at this point, which is a lot, at least compared to the last several seasons for us. Led by the right fielder Arturo Uresti, an IAFA signing in 2030, who's now the number 19 prospect in baseball. Split the year between high A ball and double A. He only hit .226 in high A ball and was striking out once every 3 at-bats. But he did have 17 homers and 327 at-bats and a 139 WRC+. So we decided to test him in double A. And although he continued to strike out just about a third of the time, he was even better in double A. The batting average got up to .286, 12 homers and 38 ribbies and just 154 at-bats. Probably going to need a little more seasoning in AAA to begin next year, but think that he could be a pretty useful right-handed hitting corner outfielder for us with some good home run power and a good eye and a lot of durability within the next few years, particularly with the fact that some of the guys that we've traded for over the last couple of years are more medium-term rentals who are heading towards expensive arbitration seasons and then likely will be too expensive for us to keep for the long term. Having a corner outfielder prospect like Uresti coming up through our organization is probably a good thing. Our only other top 50 prospect is Shiloh Solis. Picked him in the first round, 10th overall in 2031, following the one losing season we've had over these past 7 years. He's kind of been stymied the last couple of years. He spent a year and a half in high A ball at this point. Only hit .213 with an 86 WRC+. Did have 14 homers and 57 ribbies. So there are some positive things in his performance. He'll be 23 when next season gets underway. We're certainly going to promote him to double A, but as we were looking at him over the course of the season, it just didn't look like he was quite ready. But we certainly have seen times in the past, and almost saw it with Uresti, where if you promote a guy up to the next level, sometimes they can surprise you with their performance, and certainly would expect that Solis will be starting next year for us in double A, and maybe we'll get up to triple A before the end of the year. Jorge Arellana, the number 52 prospect in baseball, an IAFA signing from 2.5 years ago, hit .303 with 11 homers and 86 ribbies and 330 at-bats for our DSL team. Only 19 years old, but still probably will make it up to A-ball next year. Clearly doesn't have a ton to prove in the DSL. Doesn't look quite ready for A-ball, particularly with his ability to make contact, but hopefully 6 or 9 months from now, that'll look a little different and we'll be able to get him up there. Doug Weiss, our 4th round draft pick out of Austin P, about 2.5 years ago, is on the verge of becoming a major leaguer. He was 3-0 with a 2.10 ERA for us in double A, promoted him up to triple A. Still a good winner, a 6-2 record, but the ERA more than doubled to 4.75. Stuff still not quite major league quality. Probably will have him in the development lab working on one of his secondary pitches this coming off season. That's generally a pretty easy program and could help push his stuff a little higher if that's successful. I think we kept him, well, I know we kept him in AAA because he hadn't been great there, but even probably more importantly than that, we just didn't want to get the clock running on his arbitration years. But I think it's very conceivable that Weiss could be competing for the fourth or fifth starter role in our rotation next year, depending on what we end up being able to do this offseason. But there's a significant chance that Weiss is on the 26-man roster as a starter coming out of spring training next year, particularly if he does have some success in the dev lab. Another starting pitcher prospect who won't be joining us next year is Ernesto Comunez. He was our big IAFA signing this past offseason. Only 17 years old, spent the year at our international complex, but he will be in the DSL for us next year. Looking at his relative ratings, he looks ready to be pretty productive at that level. And then our final top 100 prospect, another starting pitcher, Jesus Saldana, IAFA signing from 2032. Split the year between A and high A, was 10-10 combined across the two levels. ERA of around 3 in A ball, but an ERA of over 5 in high A ball. Still has a pretty interesting potential profile. 21 years old. I think it's very conceivable that we'll have Saldana trying to see if we can improve him a bit in the development lab this offseason as well. And we also have 5 additional prospects ranked in the second 100, led by Joe Harmon, the 111th prospect in baseball, second round pick of ours from 2032. Spent the year in A-ball, hit just 234, but did have 22 doubles, 9 triples, 17 homers, 129 WRC plus, and a 7.3 WAR. Not quite Luis Lara as far as his defensive ratings, but he could still be a pretty interesting center fielder for us down the line. Pretty good glove, pretty good speed, some positive personality traits. Question whether his bat is going to be anything but a major league bat when all is said and done. But if he's a average major league hitter with really good speed and above average defense in center field, he could still be a pretty useful player for us in the not too distant future. Wilson Pedraza, IAFA signing from 2031. Spent most of the year in rookie ball, and you can see he was completely dominant with a 200 OPS plus. But as we were looking at his ratings over the course of the season, he just was not quite ready for A-ball. He had been so dominant that eventually we just promoted him to see what he could do. Hit just 115 in A-ball. It was admittedly a very small sample size of just 26 at-bats, but a 7 WRC plus is certainly an ugly result. He'll get a full season or potentially a full season in A-ball next year. Hopefully things will go well and maybe he'll move up to high A, but expecting more offensive production in A-ball from him next year than we saw this year. Second baseman Luis Godina, IAFA signing from 2033. 353 average in 289 at-bats. Certainly looks like he could be a pretty interesting hitter, but only 19 years old. We'll see how he develops over the coming years. Eric Wilcox, first-round pick of ours in 2033. Split the year between rookie ball and A-ball. Wasn't particularly impressive at either level with a 4.46 ERA in rookie ball and a 4.33 ERA in A-ball. But he was above replacement level at both levels. His Sierras were pretty strong at both levels. Doesn't necessarily look like he's going to be a big-time starting pitcher for us. Looks more like a fourth or fifth starter. So certainly not what we were dreaming of when we picked him 21st overall. But if he could become a good, solid left-handed starter for us when all is said and done, wouldn't be a complete loss either. Greg Moreno, third round pick in 2034, a pretty highly regarded prospect who happened to drop to us. Hit just a buck 73 in 271 at bats in rookie ball this year. He's basically been a 70 OPS plus WRC plus player across season and a half in rookie ball. Still think he's got pretty good potential. Still like his speed. Still like some of the personality traits. But clearly hoping that the now 20-year-old will start being a more productive offensive player relatively quickly if he's going to develop into a major leaguer for us over the next few years. And we'll check in on three final prospects, two of whom are a little closer to potentially helping us in the majors. Luis Coronado, second-round pick in 2031, didn't split the season. He spent the whole season in Double-A ball this year. Hit 297, 25 doubles, 19 homers, 99 ribbies, 110 WRC plus, and a 2.8 WAR. Played him primarily at first base, as we're just trying to make him as versatile as possible. But he looks like he could be a pretty interesting infielder for us. The bat doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be special, unfortunately, but he is competent to good at most infield positions. He's got some speed. I think, especially as a left-handed hitter, he could potentially be in platoon for us somewhere in the infield a year or two down the line. Worst case scenario, I think he could be a pretty interesting utility infielder and left-handed pinch hitter for us in the not too distant future. Chuck Huntley was a minor league all-star for us this year, sixth round pick in 2032. Promoted him from A-ball to high A-ball shortly after he was named to the minor league all-star game, and he put up a 3.38 ERA in high A-ball. He'll be 21 years old in about a month, less than a month actually, about 3 weeks at this point. And certainly would expect that he could be starting the year in Double-A next year. Think he could be a pretty interesting left-handed arm out of the bullpen for us in the not too distant future. And then we'll check in on one other guy who's further away, but Juan Medina was our first pick in 2034. He is another guy who struggled in his first full season in rookie ball, hitting just a buck 96. Did have 10 home runs for us, improved his WRC plus from a year ago. But another guy who at 20 years old is going to have to start being more productive against rookie-level pitching relatively quickly. And with that, it's time to find out who is going to win the World Series here in 2035, and also find out how our end-of-season evaluation with our owner goes. Interesting World Series, as we talked about. The Rangers, the best team in baseball, had a difficult 7-game series against the Orioles to make it to the World Series, while the wild card Rockies are still undefeated in the playoffs, going 9-0 against the Cardinals, the Reds, and the Padres. So something obviously is going to need to give here in the World Series. On paper, certainly the Rangers would be the favorites, but the Rockies have not lost a game in October. And the Rockies ended up carrying on their tradition of every series they were being involved in the playoffs this year being a sweep. Unfortunately for them, the mighty Texas Rangers swept them out of the World Series 4-0. And our divisional rival that's topped us for the division 3 straight years now adds a second World Series title in the past 3 years, is the mighty Rangers capped off the best regular season in baseball with a World Series title here in 2035. So we have made it to the offseason here in 2035. The development facilities are opened. Mentioned some of the younger players who will be in the development lab this year as we try to, one, encourage their development, but two, learn as much as we can about this still new feature to OOTP, and we'll continue to report on that. And obviously, next episode, we'll let you know exactly who ended up in the development lab. Off-season underway, arbitration period has begun. We are going to have several arbitration eligible players this year, and certainly some interesting decisions to make. I mentioned that we brought on guys like Harris, Brailovsky, and Patterson, who are more medium-term rentals, with the fact that they're all heading into their arbitration eligible seasons this year. I guess Patterson is heading into his first arbitration eligible season. Brailovsky and Harris have already been there for 1 and 2 seasons, respectively. No pending free agents, interestingly, although Luis Lujan won't potentially be able to get compensation for him. I believe someone mentioned this in the comments to an episode several episodes ago, but with the fact he was just a rental for us, no compensation there, unfortunately for us, but he did a good job for us. We just didn't do a good enough job around him to guide this team into the playoffs. Caden Dana, option year decision on him. Luis Lara, our longtime center fielder, another option year decision due there as well. We've already gotten a trade proposal from the Washington Nationals for Jackson Ferris. Frank Carrillo is a interesting minor league third baseman, but not interesting enough for us to trade away the ace of our staff, particularly given that starting pitching was a bit disappointing this year. Bench coach Scott Patton retired, so we'll be we will be looking for a new bench coach. Review of season goals, as we've talked about in previous episodes, expecting some mixed results here. We did great with Alejandro Landin at second base. We did solid in terms of improving fan interest, but ownership wanted us to win a World Series this year, and we did not even make the playoffs. Not happy with the team's performance this year. Expected more from us. Glad that we upgraded second base. Wants us to add an MVP to the roster, even though we developed an MVP with Juan Ortega. He still thinks we're a long way from building up our farm system, so that's a little disappointing given that we had been rated 6th. Still not happy with what we've done in fan interest, despite moving it from 54 to 68 this season. Long term, wants us to bring home a championship or 2 in the next couple years, so he remains very high with his expectations. Overall, he's satisfied with our ability to accomplish goals, happy with our overall performance. Wants us to have a winning record next year. I certainly want that as well. Wants us to improve our starting pitcher ERA. I certainly want that as well. I don't know how aggressively I'm going to go after acquiring an MVP. Just don't think we're going to have a ton of ability to really do that. Wants us to build a top 6 minor league system, increase fan interest, and build a dynasty in the next 3 seasons, despite a budget that I'm guessing is still going to be the lowest in baseball. Believe we were at 174 this past year. Where are we going to be in 2035? And he did give us another $4 million. So given that we didn't make the playoffs and we also lost a good chunk of money this past season, the fact that he upped the budget to $178 million, I really don't think I have a lot to complain about there. Taking a look at the front office, we are potentially for the first time in 12 seasons of this playthrough heading into 2036 without having the lowest budget in baseball. We will be 29th next year. I believe it was the Pittsburgh Pirates that we had been closing in on over the last few seasons, and I'm guessing we probably got by the Pirates. So I will no longer be able to say that we are doing this all with the lowest budget in baseball. And it is the Pittsburgh Pirates who we've passed by. We are now 10 million higher than them at 168 million for Pittsburgh. Detroit, Miami, and the Nationals are the only three other teams, along with us in Pittsburgh, who are below $200 million budgets. So maybe if things go well for us and not well for the Tigers, we can get up into 28th a year from now with our $178 million budget. We are still less than half of the budgets of the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Mets, and a not huge fraction of many other teams, notably the Phillies, our division rival Rangers, the Blue Jays, all have 300 million plus budgets as well. And it looks like we were definitely hurt by the re-racked rankings for the minor league system, dropped all the way to 17th. Uresti, Weiss, Soles, Camunez, and Orellana, as well as Saldana, still among the top 100 prospects. We actually have 7 top 100 prospects now, so it's a little surprising that we slipped all the way to 17th, but only one top 50 prospect now. Darnell Selvey, you may remember him. He was our first-round pick this past year. He is now listed as a top 100 prospect at number 96. Selvey hit just a $186 in 140 at-bats in rookie ball, largely as 18-year-old. Hopefully we will see more from him next season. And with that, it is time for us to call it an episode. If you've got any new thoughts on what we should do this offseason, always helpful for me to hear them. We've got a lot of kind of 4th and 5th starter, middle of the bullpen kind of guys that we talked about in our previous episode that we may be looking to move on from this offseason. We've also got to figure out what to do with our high-priced closer, Mr. Little, Mr. Camacho, the first baseman we brought on as an international free agent this past season. We've got some decisions in the outfield with Luis Lara and Mr. Taveras. And as I mentioned, a number of pitchers we've got some decisions to make on. So we will probably have simmed ahead a few more days by the time we get to our next episode, as I am going to be perusing the trade market, both for players we might be able to bring on board, but also shopping many of the players that I just mentioned to see who has the most potential value. Looking for a guy who could be a nice, solid 3 or 4 starter for us. If we can come out of the next few weeks before we even get to the trade deadline, or before we even get to the beginning of free agency. If we can get to the beginning of free agency and maybe already have made a trade for a good, solid starter, I would view that as a really nice start to this offseason. And we'll find out if we're able to make any progress on that front or other fronts in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.